Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you with Factor X number 4. This is part 36 of the Age of Apocalypse event that we've been going over. And still, I've said this before, but when the Age of Apocalypse came out back in 1995, I wasn't as versed in the X-Men lore as I am now, years later. So going back and reading this with everybody, kind of reading this with y'all, it's made me appreciate it even more now that I kind of understand more than the main cast. And this book was awesome. This is where, like the powder keg finally explodes. So let's go ahead and jump into this. The print date on this was June 1995. Last issue, we find out that Cyclops defects to the Resistance because of Jean Grey, which it starts to build up the tension that's been boiling with Alex and Cyclops for years and years, because Havoc, he's always played second fiddle to his brother, so there's a lot of animosity there. So now with Cyclops gone, Prelate Summers is the leader, and he is ruthless. But you can see that he does not have the, he does not have the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's right there at the tip of my tongue. Anyway, he doesn't have the pizzazz, we'll just say, that Cyclops did to kind of keep level heads cool. Now, what I mean by that, we'll talk about in a second, but first, let's talk about who made this book. This is Reckonings. This is John Francis Moore, writer. Steve Epting with Terry Dodson doing the penciling. Al Mingram is the inker. Richard Starkings and Comicraft lettering. Glennis Oliver, colorist. Kelly Carvese, editor, and Bob Harris was editor-in-chief. So we have a pretty good star cast on this book. Now what I mean is here we see the Pens, all the humans and mutants that wouldn't adhere to Apocalypse. And so Havoc is saying Apocalypse's order that everyone in the Pens needs to be culled or murdered. And Beast, being the eugenicist, is saying, I must protest to squander such rich and fertile genetic stock. It would be a crime. You're in no position to argue, McCoy. Especially since you let my brother and the redhead go last issue. You can see that the Bedlam brothers here, I really like the Bedlam brothers. Yes, they kind of blindly followed Apocalypse initially. But are you certain this is necessary, Alex? Look at them. These prisoners are no threat to anyone. We're the mutant elite. Fighting alpha rebels is one thing, but slaughtering the weak and wounded is beneath our station. So heads start to clash. We see Sam and his sister saying, you don't want to be messing with us when we're going to take you down. A fight about breaks out. You can see how Alex is just saying, that's enough from both of you. I want no dissension in my ranks. None. So you can see that Alex wants to lead by fear and bullying, essentially. As where Cyclops, he's always had this, even in the 616 universe, has that aura of just, for the most part, being cool and collected, but still a stern leader that everyone can respect. And that's why he's a natural born leader. Alex, in the main universe, has always been kind of that reluctant hero. Every time him and Lorna get drug into the X-Men, it's always unwillingly. Same thing when after AVX, when Captain America asked him to run the Uncanny Avengers, he was reluctant. But when he gets pushed into it, he can become a good leader because he is a Summers. But he doesn't want to do it, as where Cyclops always tends to pick up the baton and run with it, for lack of saying. But anyway, moving on. You can see how in this universe, Havoc is just a sociopath. And yeah. Anyway, we finally kind of catch up with Cyclops and Jean. And I like how Jean here says, this may sound crazy, but I think in another world, things might have been very different for us. Maybe. But we can only play the cards we've been dealt and try to keep in the game. See, Cyclops, cool, collected, calculating, but caring, because he knows that he cares for this woman. And they kind of feel this bond. He says, I feel the bond between the three of us, because if you remember in X-Men, Nate comes, and you know that from Sinister that he is made of their genetic coupling. And so that is their son, even though they don't know it. So it's like, even no matter what universe, we know that Slim and Red here love one another. And that's just the way it's always going to be, no matter how much Logan tries to push into that life. And here, this is where I really started to love the Bedlam brothers, because they decide to turn coat because they don't want to kill innocents. You know, in a war, there's always the rebels and whatnot, so each side has their own viewpoints. But they have that consciousness about them that these people are weak and suffering. Why kill them? So they turn coat and decide to become part of the resistance. And I just thought that was really awesome. And then he's like, all right, little brother, no turning back. Yeah, and no more nights uptown. After this, we're going underground. And speaking of underground, then we kind of start to see that Warren has kind of finally been forced to pick a side, because he's always been trying to play each side, you know, delivering information and whatnot, and it's really had him brush up against Apocalypse. And finally, so much of playing neutral has come back to bite him in the butt. And I like how he says here, so much for playing both sides. Now I'm just one more fallen angel who'll never see heaven again. So I like these redemption arcs in this issue, because you kind of start to see who has a heart, who cares about their fellow man, and those that just want to rule by power, i.e. the Girthies, Havoc, Dark Beast, etc., so forth. And so one of the things that Jean and Cyclops have to do to free the prisoners, I don't want to give that away because you get to really see a cool display of Jean's power, so I don't want to give that away at all. But here, Havoc's talking to Scarlet. Scarlet was the singer in Heaven, as we've seen in the latter issues of Factor X. And Havoc kind of fell for her, even though she is a human, so it had to be very hush-hush. And you find out that Scarlet, spoiler alert, is part of the Human High Council, who is a plant in Heaven. And so when she's found out, she gets captured. But Havoc's just like, tell me why I shouldn't kill you here and now. I'm pregnant. He's like, you're lying. Oh God, Alex, I wish it was. She goes, this wasn't part of the plan. So he's like, even if I couldn't escape Apocalypse's penalty for interspecies breeding. And so you kind of see what, you know, Havoc wants to be this power-hungry guy that's Apocalypse's lapdog, but there's that part of him that fell in love with someone, and now he's dealing with the consequences that he's about to be a father to, as he says, a half-breed or a half-scan, you know what I'm saying? So that's heartbreaking. I wish we had a few more scenes with this, but I know come issue 4, because each book has 4 issues, so they have to kind of rush a few plots, which is kind of like, darn, because I'd love to read some more of these character arcs instead of just the straight-up main narrative, where people in the pens are finally kind of starting to come around, because there's something, another reason why I didn't want to spoil the part of this book, that kind of kept them in a stupor, but now that that is not there anymore, they can get away. But of course, there's still that one guy that we have to watch out for, and that's Havoc. And you can see the hate he has for his brother. And it's heartbreaking, because in the main universe, you know that these two work side by side and love one another deeply, but not here. And it's just, darn. That's why I like here where Havoc says, I wish you'd never been born. I know, I've heard you say that all my life. Get over it. And I like how Scott is finally redeemed. Because I remember when I first read Factor X, I went, this isn't the Scott Summers that I know. So I'm just glad that we kind of start to see him as more of a Schindler's List type character in this book. And I think that's where they drew a lot of the inspiration. But yeah, it's just overall absolutely awesome read. That's why I'm glad that I'm going back through here, because I didn't really like Factor X when I was younger, because I didn't know a lot of the mutants that were in this book. But now it's like, oh man, you see what happens to Karma, because I love the New Mutants, and then the Girthies, and you're like, man, that's not Sam, who has that gentlemanly southern attitude and whatnot. But again, this is a twisted, broken universe. And so it's interesting to see the take, especially with Henry McCoy, because you're not used to the big bumbling, loving beast being this dark, evil eugenist who just cares about stripping people down to their organic matter to make infinites for Apocalypse's army. So yeah, Factor X number 4, guys. Excellent read. Grade A. If you've enjoyed this book, please first and foremost support your local comic shop and pick up a copy. And if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate if you take a moment to hit like, share it, and subscribe. And if you won't mind hitting that fancy little X bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. Come to the channel, and we love talking with y'all and hearing your feedback down in the comments below or on our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, I hope y'all continue to have an absolutely uncanny day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.